We have pleasure to present Mr. Nuno Lousa with his presentation, VisiMix in API Batch Manufacturing, Improving Multi-Phase Processes. Nuno Lousa is an author of several peer-reviewed publications and patents at the drug design field. Over the past 5 years, he has been working for Hovione Pharmaceutica. His main duty is to ensure the successful scale-up and tech transfer of API and drug product manufacturing operation through the evaluation of batch reactor, mixing performance, and process safety risk analysis. Please, Nuno, you can start. Best of luck.
Hi, Dalia. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for the kind introduction. I will also like to acknowledge VisiMix for the invitation to do this webinar. I hope everyone will enjoy. So let's go over the agenda for this presentation. I will start off by speaking a bit about Hovione. Who are we? For those who are not who don't know us. And also, I will discuss briefly the importance of mixing simulations in our business, namely its importance due to the subjective nature of mixing. Then the peak of the presentation will be a couple of case studies regarding a hydrogenation reaction and the optimization of a liquid-liquid extraction. And I will end with a few conclusions regarding the benefits of using this mixing simulation tool. So Hovione, who are we? We are a pharmaceutical company dedicated to helping pharmaceutical customers bringing new and off-patent drugs to market. We usually say that we achieve the impossible. We can do what is difficult, and we give to our customers what they cannot find elsewhere. So our history began over almost 60 years ago. This is our founder, Ivan Vilax. We are a family business, which enables us to have stable management and long-term commitment to our customers, which are mainly biotechs, medium specialty and large pharma, but also some generic pharmaceutical companies as well. The past has been very good for us, but the future is expected to be even brighter. We started off by developing several patents in the corticosteroids and semi-synthetic tetracyclines in the 60s and 70s years, and later on the 90s we started off by having particle engineering capabilities, which make us now one of the top players in the world regarding spray drying and other particle engineering technologies. We are based almost worldwide. We have a very nice and the most important site is in Lourdes, Portugal, where I'm broadcasting this presentation. We have an R&D center, a state-of-the-art R&D center in Lisbon, and our plant in Lourdes. But also in the United States, we have a very nice pilot plant facilities and the research and development labs. We have in Cork huge manufacturing capabilities, which were acquired from Pfizer almost 10 years ago, but also a very important producing unit in Macau, China. So let's begin. Why do I think mixing? When do we consider that mixing is enough? This is a very interesting question because, as you'll be able to see, many times we are asked to quantify mixing and to determine scale of factors by our customers, but also by my colleagues, my chemist colleagues, and my colleagues from the engineering, from the manufacturing, our engineers. So some of the questions I came across are usually I once was in a teleconference where a customer asked he wanted efficient mixing at this stage, but we didn't have any sort of indication of what could be good mixing, because we didn't know what reactor we're going to use, or the impeller type, or even simple RPMs in the lab. We had no idea. But he actually mentioned that it would be important. So this tool allows us to quantify this sort of efficient mixing, which is very important. Also, mixing issues when we perform scale-up can destroy a batch, and even if this is impurity increase or different crystal polymorphs, or even excessive time during operations, all of this can cost a lot of money. So I strongly advise for people to invest in this type of studies. I also get very funny questions from my colleagues at the chemistry department, like, can we avoid wall splashing? This is very important when you're dealing with crystallization by distillation, for example, where you can get the product stuck in the reactor walls. And if in the lab this is not very, let's say, hazardous, because it's a very small amount of product, and you can actually see it becoming stuck, and you can try to make it go to the liquid again. And when you are at manufacturing, this can be a real problem. So this type of simulations also help us to understand if this can happen. And of course, I always get this call from time to time from a process engineer telling me we have a problem. And of course, this is what I want to avoid. I want to make sure that when we move from the lab, we develop our process, we move to pilot plant, we scale it up to manufacturing, and we don't have any problems, because we know what is good mixing. Okay. This is in this slide I'm presenting a small, a very basic explanation of how I usually evaluate the mixing properties in a vessel. I think I have the Dalia, where can I get the pointed? Okay, no, sorry. What I do, I start off by evaluating using the software, VisiMix software, to calculate mixing parameters, mixing properties such as the blending time, micromixing, mesomixing, hydrodynamics, flow speed and direction, very important as well, but also energy dissipation, and in case of multi-phase dispersions, we also have solids suspension, we have droplet sizes, we have specific area for mass transfer. So very useful parameters that you can then try to modulate by changing your steering speed, your batch size. This includes batch size at manufacturing. Sometimes I can actually say to the process engineer that it's better to do 2 batches instead of 1, if I found that the mixing parameter can have a great influence in the process. Also, by changing the impeller or the baffle type, we can also try to force the process to have the parameters that we know are important. I've also come across situations where I had to select a specific reagent inlet positions for instance, in areas of maximum energy dissipation, in order to maximize the mass transfer for the process. But also, VisiMix also has a very important tool for me, since I work with risk analysis and process safety. It's the ability to predict the heating profile at manufacturing, which is very interesting tool from the process safety point of view. So moving on, eventually moving on. So I need to, something's wrong. Okay, so there's just a small glimpse here. So actually, there's no universal question for how mixing is enough. You always need to study your process in the lab, or at least gather some observations when you are at manufacturing, so that you are then able to scale down the process and perform some troubleshooting. I usually do this in the lab because it's less expensive. Anyway, each application may or may not have its own mixing demand. This slide highlights some of the situations I have used where I have used VisiMix. We have pretty much everything there is to be regarding API manufacturing and scale up. I used to transfer processes from the lab to pilot plan, including to transfer process from customer reactors to Hovione, which is very nice as well. It helps us a lot in getting the right first-time approach. Between Hovione sites, I've came across problems in emulsion formation, crystallizations, also heat transfer, as I was saying. I've also had the opportunity to study hydrogenations, which you will see one today. And of course, the mechanical design, because when we want a new impeller, we actually ask for the suppliers for specific characteristics of that impeller. We don't ask the supplier to help us in choosing the best impeller. We do pretty much the opposite. We present the supplier with the impeller we want. All in all, this will provide very nice benefits, such as risk mitigation for batch failure. This is the main risk, the main benefit I can get from using the software, but also process improvement, increased know-how, because you'll be able to understand your processes better, and of course, as I said before, process safety. We will then see a case study regarding hydrogenation and a case study regarding liquid-liquid extraction. So, as for the hydrogenation, the goal here, the objective here was to perform a tech transfer, which turned out to be a success. But during that tech transfer, I came across several observations which enabled me to optimize our process by improving the impurity profile and cycle time. Okay, so let me show you how all happened. So this started off by the need to increase the production throughput, and so we had to replicate a process that was going on in our site. It usually used a 3,000 liter hydrogenator, and now we had to use also a 6,000 liter hydrogenator. So this happened a long time ago, and no one really knows how the new steering speed, the 164 steering RPMs were selected, because we asked the manufacturer of this reactor to actually design the impeller in order to replicate the mixing conditions observed in the first reactor, in the first site. The fact was that the process went on very smoothly, and now I had the challenge to transfer again this process, but in this time it was for a 5,000 liter hydrogenator. The hydrogenator had several particularities, namely the three-stage impeller system, whereas the previous two hydrogenators only had two impeller stage, and it also was a bit had a higher diameter to height ratio, so it was like a cigar, you know, we usually call it like that. Anyway, so how did I approach this issue? I started off by simulating simulating both reactors, the initial ones, the 3,000 liter and the 6,000 liter hydrogenator, and I found that they had exactly the same maximum energy dissipation profile. So it was pretty clear to me, pretty obvious, that the manufacturer also used this approach in order to simulate the mixing conditions that would return the process output. The fact is that the reaction output in both of these reactors was very similar. So in case of reaction time and in impurity profile, everything was very, very alike. So I concluded that probably we would also use this approach in order to select the adequate RPMs in the 5,000 liter reactor. In fact, when we used these new RPMs, which were 158 for the new hydrogenator, the performance of the process was outstanding. It actually cut the reaction time almost to half, and we obtained the lowest values of impurities ever. After discussing these observations with our process chemists, we quickly understood that this was due to a faster reaction, because one of the impurities was correlated with long reaction times. So we actually was pretty obvious that the increase in mass transfer was taking place. But since we were mimicking the exact same energy dissipation conditions, something was missing from here. So I went on to the software again. I did some more simulations, but this time I evaluated the gas-liquid parameters. And as you can see, in the previous reactors, they were all about the same order of magnitude, namely the estimation surface aeration rate, and for instance, this one I like very much, the specific mass transfer area. So they're pretty much the same order of magnitude, okay? But when we move to the new reactor, we jumped one order of magnitude. So in fact, the new hydrogenator, the 5,000 liter hydrogenator, had a much more high ability to improve the mass transfer for this process, which will explain why we are observing such a fast reaction and low impurity profiles. So the question was now, can I do this for the other reactors? Can I try to improve this process in the other hydrogenators? I had to back up a bit this. I had to find a rationale for this, because I was about to suggest changes to a process that was already validated and approved for the FDA and so on. So you can find a lot of references in the literature that correlate a high KLA, a mass transfer coefficient, with hydrogenation reactions. So it was pretty easy. But also the VisiMix allows us to check, to visualize the flow pattern inside the hydrogenator. And what you can see here is a clear compartmentalization caused by the 3 different impeller stages. So this type of impellers, a rush-down turbine, can create, when they are used in more than one stage, they can create this type of compartmentalization effect. And if you insert the hydrogen from the bottom, this will take longer time to leave the reactor, because the flow is actually pushing it down, thus fighting a bit its buoyancy. Okay, you can also find a lot of reports such as this one in the literature. So I thought this could be a nice approach, and I did a lot of simulations in the 6,000 liter hydrogenator, the one that actually was used very often. I did a lot of simulations. You can only see one, just by adding an extra impeller stage. Although our energy dissipation profile, the maximum energy dissipation profile, would be slightly lower than the previous reactor, the gas liquid properties would increase the 1 order of magnitude, which was actually what happened in the 5,000 liter reactor, which yielded a very nice reaction. Okay, so very simple way to optimize the process, just by inserting a new impeller stage. But this had some engineering concerns, of course, but the software also allows us to do this type of simulations. You can actually check what would be the impact in the stability of your shaft and in the power output that it will now take from your engine, your motor. And what you can see is that I remember that the motor had something like 22 kilowatts of power, so we were way below we had enough power to accommodate the new impeller stage. But we are also very happy with the critical frequency. This is very important, especially in hydrogenators. For you guys that have experience on this, we cannot have vibrations in the shaft. Otherwise, we can compromise we can have leaks in our hydrogenator, and we don't want that for safety reasons, of course. Anyway, so I used these values and presented them to our engineering department, which were very happy. They went on to search for the new impeller stage, and they actually got it installed. And we were able then to not only to perform this successful tech transfer from the 6,000 liter reactor to the 5,000 liter, but then after gaining some more knowledge about the process, we were able to improve the process in the 6,000 liter reactor, and generating less impurities and decreasing the reaction time, which actually increased the manufacturing turnover, which was amazing, was a very important achievement. So I hope this first part was clear. I will now present some of the work I have developed using liquid extractions. This was a bit more complex, because I had to, at the beginning, I had to find a very nice rationale to apply this software in modeling this type of process. And because the liquid extraction itself is very complex, you have a lot of variables, and you have a lot of mixing parameters which can actually have influence in this type of process. So it was very important for me to be able to narrow down the mixing parameters and focus only on the most important ones. My goal was actually to develop a methodology, a transversal methodology, that could be used in all liquid-liquid extractions performed at Hovione. I will show you how. Of course, some of the background might be important for those who are not. Bear in mind, please, that for me, it's very important not to have an emotion. Okay, so in some pharmaceutical industries, of course, when we do some foams and creams, we want to have emotions. We want to have stable emotions, homogeneous emotions. But when we talk about liquid-liquid extractions, mainly used for quench and workup, for when we do a chemical synthesis, we don't want emulsions to form. We want a good extraction to take place and very fast layer separation so that we can move on with our process. It happens sometimes that we use so much mixing intensity that we then have to wait a lot for the phases to separate, which can have impact in the planning and sometimes also in the batch quality. So we really want to avoid that. We don't want that to happen. So liquid-liquid extraction, we usually have two immiscible liquids. One we call a disperse phase that forms drops in a matrix or continuous phase. Okay. Mixing as the mixing main impact is in the equilibrium established between drop coalescence and drop breakup. So drop breakup mainly happens in the areas of the vessel where we have high turbulence, high energy dissipation, okay, near the impeller, near the baffles. Drop coalescence mainly happens in the bulk of the vessel or in the top, or basically in the opposite areas where we have low energy dissipation. So it is actually an equilibrium between these two phenomena that will determine if you have a fast separation or even an emulsion formation. Okay. The problem is that when we work in the lab, we do a reaction in a 0.5 liter or 1 liter vessel. The hydrodynamics in this type of vessels is very different from the ones you find in a 10,000 liter reactor, for instance. So many times you feel that you don't have a problem with emulsion because the layers separated very, very, very fast. But when you move to production, you'll end up waiting 4 times for four hours for a phase separation to take place, or even longer times, which is highly undesirable. So as I said before, my goal was actually to develop an efficient and reliable methodology to anticipate emulsion formation and to predict the phase separation time at manufacturing. So quite a moonshot. Anyway, how did I do this? I started off by doing a lot of literature research. There are some articles, very nice publications in this area, in this field. You also have a very interesting book, the handbook of mixing. I also recommend for you guys that if you are trying to get inside the mixing world now, you should read the book. VisiMix also has a very nice help file. It actually pinpoints some of the main important, the main mixing parameters that are important for this type of process. But I really wanted to narrow it down just for 2 or 3 mixing parameters so that I could actually perform a successful scale down of my operations, because you will not be able to mimic all the mixing parameters that you can calculate. So you will actually have to make it make a choice. And sometimes you will not be able to do enough laboratory experiments in order to quantify the importance of different mixing parameters. So I had to do this sort of initial screening in order to find what were the real important mixing parameters so that I could apply it to process troubleshooting and scale up. Okay. So some of the parameters you will see more related with liquid-liquid extraction will be the mean drop size, of course, because it regulates the smaller the drops, the easier it is to form an emulsion. Of course, turbulence shear rate at the blade and maximum energy dissipation will also have a lot of influence in the drop size. Circulation flow rate is also very important because if you have a high shear area inside the reactor, you'll need to recirculate the mixture through that area in order to create the drops. And of course, related with the circulation flow time is the relative residence time in the different areas of the reactor. Because if your mixture spends a lot of time in the bulk, then you'll actually improve coalescence. But in the opposite, if the mixture spends a lot of time in the near the impeller, you actually promote drop breakup. Okay. Of course, I also gathered some observations from our manufacturing and did a lot of laboratory experiments. Okay, as you can see here, the experimental apparatus at stage 2 of this development, I end up by selecting a reactor geometry of 1 liter. I had 2 impellers I could use, and I checked for a lot of liquid systems. The ones that are best studied in the literature are the oil in water, and it was actually what I used. So I used also a statistical planning software called MODE that you can use in a DOE approach to find correlation between variables, for instance, or to plan your experiments in order to get full factorial analysis. This was made in sort of interaction between the experimental apparatus until I had enough confidence in the model to use it to scale it. Okay. This is a bit, perhaps, is a bit complex. I'll be happy to answer more questions at the end of this presentation. But what I'm showing you now is the results, actually experimental results of using 3 different impellers. So you have impeller 1, 2, and 3. They had either different tip diameters or width. I end up using retreat curved impellers. And what you see here is that the phase separation time is actually dependent on the maximum energy dissipation. This is only one mixing variable that I'm showing. But I was very happy because this sort of, in the real world, if you want to get R squares of 0.999, something is wrong. So to get this type of R squares, I was very happy to see it. But also when I was looking at results, it became clear that we might have some interaction with other mixing variables, which is not I was expecting because I had a lot of reports about it in the literature. Anyway, very importantly was that for different impellers, but that were able to promote the same maximum energy dissipation, we had similar separation times. So actually, we were changing the geometry of our system, but if we kept this maximum energy dissipation constant, we will have the same output, which is also very encouraging. I use this type of data in the software, in the mode, to generate a model. I was trying to use this model to predict. Of course, it's not a perfect model, as you can see here. These are let's say, the coefficients that you can associate to the different mixing parameters. You can see it has the weight of a mixing parameter in the output of the experiment. In this case, it was the phase separation time. You can clearly see that the maximum energy dissipation had the most importance, as you saw in the previous slide, but there's also a very important interaction with the relative residence time in the zone of maximum dissipation. So I now had a power input and a geometry input that would come together to define the output of my liquid-liquid extraction. This would make my life very easy because now I can focus on specific mixing parameters in order to perform scale downs or scale up of my processes. As you can see here, if you guys are familiar with the mode, you probably know this graph. It had the model that you can see here, the observed values versus the predicted ones. It's a very nice correlation. You also have a very good predictability factor here, the Q squared. The reproducibility of the system was also very satisfactory, as you can see. So all in all, I was very happy to be able to find this model, and I was now able to go to manufacturing to use it to improve ongoing process. So in this slide, I am showing you real manufacturing, not manufacturing, but real data from a process that I scaled down to the lab. This was an ongoing process at the manufacturing. And what you can see is that the initial mixing conditions or the mixing conditions observed at manufacturing will always generate small emulsion. This emulsion contained a lot of impurities and had to be discarded. It equivalates to approximately 40 kilograms of reaction mass, And if you guys work in this business, you know how much 1 kilogram of API is worth. So we were losing a lot of money because we didn't want to compromise the quality of the product. We had to discard this emulsion since it contained a high amount of impurities. However, in the lab, just by tuning the mixing intensity of this extraction, I was able to perform it without the emulsion formation, or very low amounts of emulsion. I call it here optimized mixing conditions. My goal was to then perform, to mimic these conditions at manufacturing in order to reduce the amount of emulsion that we are forming. But when we deal with liquid-liquid extractions, if you don't mix enough, you can actually always you can also have influence in the outcome of the liquid-liquid extraction, because you need mixing to extract. So if you reduce the mixing, you may not be able to get your specification. In this case, what you see here is that the impurity that I was removing in my extraction, in the red line, the optimized conditions, we were able to, at the end of 3 extractions, which was had to be done as per manufacturing technique, I will always get the product inside specification. However, you can see here the difference between, by changing the steering speed between the old conditions, the initial ones that formed an emulsion, and the optimized ones. So if at the manufacturing, at the end of 2 extractions, we are already inside the specification limit, whereas in the lab, using the optimized conditions, I were not. But since I had to perform 3 extractions always, I will always be inside the specification limit. So we were able to improve the yield of this process, which is a very, very impressive result as well. So to conclude, what were the lessons learned? Very important was the key mixing parameters that were identified at the early stage of this development. I was able to find that the maximum energy dissipation and the relative residence time in the zone of maximum energy dissipation were in fact the most important mixing parameters in the liquid-liquid extractions I studied. I also increased my know-how because I'm now applying this model to all the liquid-liquid extractions I find in Hovione. But of course, the one that you guys probably want to hear most is that I was able to improve batch yield and cycle time, because we had to wait a bit longer to separate that small emulsion that was formed, and now I have no emulsion, so I could move forward with my process. To conclude, so basically it's just to highlight the main benefits that can come from using this software. Scientists can develop process knowledge because, as our CEO once said, we deliver packed knowledge. It's very important for you to understand your process and to find the scalar variables that have influence in your process. Also, process engineers are now able to quantify the mass transfer phenomenon that comes from the mixing, which is part of a right first time approach when we perform a scale up or do a tech transfer. But also very important is that our mechanical engineers can now have an extra tool to design our equipment. We can actually try to simulate if the introduction of a new impeller, of a new addition point can have, what is the mechanical impact in the reactor. Anyway, new medicines are of course are available in a safer, faster, and cheaper way. I would like to thank you very much for your attention, but also I need to mention to pay an acknowledgement to my line manager, Carlos Alvarez, which was a pioneer in the use of this software, but also the process engineers that were involved in the processes that I've shown you, Pedro Santos and Hélio Lourenço, and also Luis Olival from the engineering department, which handled the part of improving of inserting a new impeller in the 6,000 liter reactor. I'll be happy to answer to any questions that you may have. Dalia.
Okay, so thank you very much, Nuno. He's speaking Moshe Ventolila.
Hi, Moshe.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Very good. It was very interesting presentation. I enjoy a lot about your connections between the process and the requirements you need to answer to the company. I think it was very good, very well exposed to everyone. We have some questions here, so I will give the microphone to people that want to ask questions. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Bob Pripko had two questions during the meeting that I answered in a general way, but maybe you want to ask specifically. So Bob Pripko is a very good customer of VisiMix. If you want to ask some questions, your microphone is open.
Oh, can you hear me, Moshe?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Again.
I can't hear anything.
Yeah, problem. See, he moved by himself. So maybe I will give again. Okay, I will contact to Mrs. Silvia Garbarino. Okay, and I will try to open the microphone again to Mr. Bob Lipko. Second, Mrs. Silvia, 1 second. I will open your microphone. Now it's open. Silvia, please. Silvia. She is asking. Okay, I will read her questions. I can see your software is based on metric approach. Is there a danger of using it as black box, giving wrong meanings of the output in the calculations? Do you want to answer? I will complete your answer.
I'm not sure if I understood the question. So she's saying that the software is based in
some black box. Okay. So
some black box. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. I had when I started off using this software over 4 years ago. I had the exact same question as you, Sylvia. The software itself has some built-in engineering equations that we don't have access to. And if you search in the literature, many times you can find that some equations are only valid within certain range of let's say within a certain context. So many times I approached VisiMix with this kind of concern. I end up having a call from a VisiMix CEO, which actually explained to me what were some details regarding the equations used by the software. Of course, they cannot disclose them because I believe it is part of their business model. But I know that they are available to explain whenever you have a doubt. So I don't know, Moshe. Perhaps you should
yes.
enlighten.
I will give a little more. Is for instance, if you want to know how we calculate the velocity, we are doing momentum balance, and this momentum balance is based on papers and books that were published in different opportunities. Into the website, you will find the review of mathematical models, and when you are part of our customer support, we explain to you, if you like, what is the base of all the calculations and models we have inside. What I agree with you that there's a different way to approach mixing that you can find in the literature in the east part of the world, because the people are coming from the other part of the world, that is Russia, and they have a different approach and way to think. But it's very interesting that this complementary way to think provides to you response that is very fast, and always you need to compare your results and to correlate your results with the quality of the process. And this gives you a very good way to think. Anyway, the model is really open. Okay, you can see the review of mathematical models. You can download, and for more deeply explanation, you can contact us and we can explain with no problem. Mr. Bob Pripko, that is working in Hovione, is very good company, had two questions that I will read because I not find a way to open his microphone. The first is, how is mesomixing calculated? I answer it that this was calculated in a correlation between the flow patterns, okay, the circulation flow patterns that we have, and the volume. That it is not exactly the same definition you will find in the Handbook of Industrial Mixing that support more for computational fluid dynamics. But it is a different realistic way to think and to try to compare between something that you can measure in a very fast way, because the mesomixing normally is very, very high velocity. The second question is for you, Nuno. Is it max energy of dissipation in the bulk? And my question is, in your work in the liquid-liquid system, you discussed about the high energy of dissipation. Did you find some work, some influence in the bulk? Or because in the bulk you did some collisions, covalence between drops, and in the high energy dissipation you are doing some breakup. So what was more important for you, and you can explain a little more about it?
Yes, okay. Just to give a small sprinkle of mesomixing I was referring, you can use the software to generate the energy dissipation and the flow velocities that are required to calculate this parameter with equations in the literature. This is how I use it. So the software actually doesn't give me directly the mesomixing value, but you can use the software to generate the energy dissipation and flow velocity that you need to calculate the mesomixing value. Regarding the second question and the bulk energy dissipation, when I did the experiments, I had this huge Excel spreadsheet where I actually inserted all the parameters I could find in VisiMix. Oh, not all, but I would say like 50 or 60% of all the parameters that were in VisiMix. I was then able to, one by one, using the Mode software, to try to find which of these parameters will generate the best correlation between what I was observing, which was the phase separation time, and the parameter itself. And the one that stood out was more acceptable was the maximum energy dissipation, because for the same energy maximum energy dissipation, I was observing the same separation time, whereas for the bulk energy dissipation, I was not. So it was easier to find this type of correlation. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Yes, yes. For me, it was okay. We have here another two notifications. One from Roberto Novoa, is in our team. Congratulate you for the presentation. And we have another question here. Evgeny Reuvenov is asking about, could you share a link for the book Mixing you mentioned during the first part of your presentation? So if you can mention the book that you use or send it to us, we will provide to everyone which literature you recommend to use. Okay?
Okay. I can do a summary of the ones I have, the documents I have here with me, but
okay,
can't do it now.
When you mention the book, you talk about a handbook of industrial mixing or some.
Well, the handbook of industrial mixing has a lot of about this, but it also has a lot of references in the open literature that you can check.
Okay.
I know because at the time I've gathered a quite nice amount of publications in this area, and I can try to make a summary out of them and share with you.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. What we have to emphasize more is the VisiMix is not a collection of empirical equations that you can find in the literature. It's a very deeply study of how will be the influence of the mixing in the process, and the responses are based not only on solution of momentum balance alone, in combination with the empirical data we'll collect for many different kinds of flows that we generate in the laboratory. So this connection and the theory and the practical, so semi-empirical models are giving you a confidence that results are good, and you can see it in different kinds of works. But the more important thing is to connect between the process and what you are looking for. And Nuno explained it perfect. It is the main important point. This synergism will give us a capability to design the experiments that will answer the question that we have with tools like statistics tools that you did, and many other kinds of skills to try to coordinate all of these huge number of parameters in 3 or 4, 2 or 3 that are manageable and simple to connect and to explain to our colleagues in different fields. So it was perfect. Thank you very much. If you can share with us the copy of the presentation, we'll be very happy. And thank you very much for attending. We will have our next meeting in about one and a half, 2 months with other experts like Nuno that explain us in different point of view how we can connect between our process and our equipment to be sure that it will generate safe products, good chemistry, and good process in the industry. Thank you very much, Nuno, for your very good presentation. Have a good day.
Thank
everyone.
you, Moshe. Thank you a lot, Moshe.
Thank you.
Nice to hear from you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for attending.